Good afternoon. My name is Miriam Cunningham. The IEEE Region 8 Humanitarian Technology Activities Committee Project Monitoring and Visibility is organising a series of capacity building webinars to support IEEE volunteers and sites to prepare and undertake effective community-driven projects. On the 4th of July, we provided an introduction to activities supported by Region 8 Humanitarian Technology Activities Committee and the 2024 Community Support Programme, which closes on the 6th of September. So we have IEEE volunteers registered for this programme from 38 countries. So Algeria, Austria, Botswana, Bulgaria, Egypt, Ethiopia, France, Germany, Ghana, Greece, Iran, Italy, Ireland, Jordan, Kenya, Lebanon, Mauritius, Morocco, Nigeria, North Macedonia, Oman, Poland, Portugal, Romania, South Arabia, Senegal, Serbia, Montenegro, South Africa, Spain, Sudan, Sweden, Tanzania, Turkey, Uganda, United Kingdom, United Arab Emirates, and Zambia, and you're all most welcome. So today we're joined by Theodoros, Chair of the Region 8 Humanitarian Technology Activities, and Lucia, who's responsible for the 2024 Community Support Programme. So today I'm going to share insights into practical experiences associated with community engagement and needs assessment in resource-constrained environments based on over 20 years' experience cooperating with African ministries and research and innovation communities, as well as extensive fieldwork in Africa. So in terms of my background, I'm a technology and innovation expert with over 25 years' experience working with education and research, industry and government organizations to support ICT for development, digital development in Africa and Europe. I specialize in contributing to policy analysis, research, capacity building, adaptation, and implementation of appropriate technology addressing societal challenges in low-resource environments. I have extensive experience as a co-principal investigator in large-scale digital technology innovation-orientated cross-border and regional projects in Europe and Africa. I am head of research of the not-for-profit IST-Africa Institute, working in strategic partnership with ministries and national councils responsible for innovation, science and technology in 18 African member states. In a volunteer capacity, I'm an IEEE senior member, a member of IEEE Eta Kappa Nu, the Honours Society. I've served in senior IEEE volunteer roles, including as a member of the Board of Governors of the Society on Societal Implications of Technology. I'm the chair of the UK and Ireland SSIT chapter. I was a member of the IEEE Humanitarian Technologies Board in 2023, and I'm a member of the Region 8 Humanitarian Technology Activities Committee since 2022. So in my professional capacity, we've selected collaborative open innovation and co-design as underlying methodologies when instigating interventions that can be leveraged by communities. And I'll now briefly summarize these concepts. If we look at innovation, according to OECD, in 2025, innovation is the improvement of products, services, processes, business models, policies, and concepts in an existing context, whether social or economic, or their adaptation from one context to another, with the goal of increasing performance and achieving another desired impact. The concept of collaborative open innovation has been influenced by Chesberg in 2006 and von Hippel from 1986. So both of these concepts are focused around pooling of innovative ideas from different stakeholder groups based on a trusting relationship to achieve a common good and goal that meets a specific defined user need. There are different types of innovation. So if we look at the propeller, we have technology innovation, business innovation, learning innovation, social innovation, and aesthetic innovation. And in reality, most interventions incorporate a number of different types of innovation. At the preparatory stage, prior to engaging with stakeholders and end users from local communities, it would be advisable for the project team to think through the types of innovation most appropriate in your social and cultural environment. For example, if an innovation is initially conceived from the lens of technology innovation, it will also consider the intended and unintended social aspects, so the social innovation, to ensure it's socially and culturally relevant and fulfills a real need. It will consider aesthetic aspects to ensure ease of use. It should consider learning aspects to support necessary skills and human capacity building in the context of lifelong learning, and it would also consider business aspects to ensure some aspect of sustainability. So as you embark on the path to create and implement a project concept, you need to think about the types of innovation that are most relevant for the end user communities whose needs you are addressing. When we look at the role of open innovation in the realm of global development, it's necessary to consider the innovation ecosystem stakeholders. So based on studies Paul and I have published, we consider that globalization, technological and social innovations have expanded the universe of contributing innovation stakeholders to include public, private, education and research, societal, international development and funding sectors, end user communities and innovation spaces, both inside and outside national borders, as outlined in the diagram. And consideration of open innovation supports co-design with end-user communities. It reduces the risks associated with technology push, it informs the socio and cultural adaptation, and it ultimately reduces the implementation risks from both a technological and a social aspect. So you need to think about who are the key stakeholder groups that should be involved in your project intervention. International development has gone through a number of phases, leveraging different underlying theories from colonialism and capitalism, different industrial revolutions and neoliberalism, to a more people-centered and bottom-up development approach. In the 1950s and 1960s, it was felt that technology has a role in supporting economic development through productivity increases as part of the industrialization movement. And certain lessons were learned in terms of necessary adaptation to the cultural and social norms within the beneficiary community and awareness of trying to achieve a more balanced approach between technology and innovation push versus end user community needs. With the new millennium in 2000, there was again an optimism that technology can assist in the spread of ICTs, and governments with funding support started to invest in infrastructure, bringing wider use of electrification and access to broadband. The Millennium Development Goals provided a needs-driven framework to facilitate greater coordination and collaboration between development stakeholders, including donors focused on areas including education, health, environmental sustainability, and partnerships. And as a follow-on to the Millennium Development Goals, governments around the world adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in 2015. The SDGs provide a framework within which all stakeholders cooperate to support peace and prosperity as a global partnership. In the context of supporting the SDGs, we'll briefly look at what we mean by sustainable development, ICT for development, and digital literacy and e-skills development to support reducing the digital divide. According to the Bentrand report, sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. when we look at ICT for development, information communication technologies is a horizontal enabler that, when used appropriately, has the potential to act as a multiplier of available human and other resources. And development is the process of strengthening capacity in resource-constrained environments with the objective of improving the overall quality of life in society by empowering communities and accelerating economic and employment opportunities for individuals. ICT for development is about improving the quality of life and accelerating social, economic, political, and employment opportunities in resource-constrained environments by adapting appropriate technology good practices in areas including agriculture, education, healthcare, and public service delivery to address the needs, aspirations, and capabilities of local communities. So, important issues that we would consider when developing any ICT for development project include appropriateness and adaptation of the technology. So ultimately, is the technological solution we're proposing fit for purpose, bearing in mind the social and cultural environment within which the intervention will take place? What sort of training is required? How will we deal with skills transfer and change management? Because essentially, we're providing something new into an environment. So there's always a change management aspect. Then local ownership, sustainability, and potentially employment creation if this is appropriate within the intervention. OECD defines digital development as a gap between individuals, households, businesses, and geographic areas at different socioeconomic levels in relation to both their opportunities to access information communication technologies and to their use of the internet for a wide variety of activities. OECD defines digital skills as a range of abilities to use digital devices, communication applications, and networks to access and manage information. So strengthening digital skills or digital literacy capabilities are necessary foundational prerequisites to enable locally owned, sustainable adoption of technological innovation. And as a reminder, the specific SDGs that the 24 Community Support Programme is focused on addressing include SDG 4, so lifelong learning, SDG 5, SDG 11, sustainable cities and communities, SDG 13, climate action, and SDG 15, life on land, focused primarily on sustainably managing forests, halting and reversing land degradation, and halting biodiversity loss. So now that we have a context in which these interventions take place, we will now look at the specifics of community engagement. So this program is focused on addressing a real community need through the appropriate use of technological innovation by both IEEE volunteers through a special interest group on humanitarian technology site in cooperation with relevant stakeholders. So as a result, our starting lens is people-centered, followed by processes to identify appropriate technology. So our first question is, who are the relevant local, disadvantaged and resource-constrained communities that your site wishes to support? And these should be local communities, meaning communities that are close to where the site has a pool of volunteers, that you can have an active and ongoing engagement with them. We are not looking for bungee projects where a group of volunteers pop into a community, do an intervention for a couple of weeks, and then pop out again, and the community gets exhausted through this activity rather than it being a positive learning experience for both parties. The engagement process is both cultural specific, but in general, it requires identification of who is the main gatekeeper, so the community leader and the project champion within the community. So it's critical to identify the challenges that the community is facing and how technological adaptation can address these challenges and how this intervention will benefit the community. And ideally, this benefit should be articulated by the community. It's then necessary to identify and agree the roles of the different stakeholders, so the community, the site volunteers, and the other entities that your project plans to cooperate with. So for example, in some contexts, there may already be community groups or NGOs or industry partners working with this community where the site volunteers can add value to existing skills and supports available to the community, which makes the project more successful, more sustainable, and it has a bigger benefit for all the stakeholder groups. So any community intervention requires a trust relationship. And ideally, a site should identify a local community or a number of communities where they can have a longer term engagement. So this is beneficial to both the volunteers and to the beneficiary community. There must be a feeling of local ownership for a project to be successful and sustainable. So in your context, it's important to identify how this is achieved. In terms of needs assessment, after identifying the local community that the site will support, and the next steps as part of preparing the community-driven project is to identify the needs assessment. So identification of the needs of a local community requires a consultation process to identify the unique situation and the challenges that would be beneficial to be addressed. As part of the community engagement discussed previously, there would be agreement between the stakeholder groups and the community leaders on which stakeholders within the community the site volunteers will engage with, when and how. Because there needs to be an initial sensitization among the community of why this engagement is taking place and what the purpose is. The needs assessment has 4 primary activities. Firstly, there's a planning stage, followed by preparing the questionnaire and the semi-structured interview questions, followed by the data collection stage, and finally the data analysis. So within the project planning stage, it's important to consider the specific purpose of this needs assessment. In this context, you would consider what you need to know and what you already know about this community and its challenges, so that the needs assessment has a very clear focus and you don't end up confusing people or getting confused. There needs to be agreement and consideration of which local stakeholders should participate to achieve representative results. And then, how do you plan to use the data collected? And these aspects, it's important that this is clearly articulated to the community that you're engaging with. Then during the second phase, you would prepare the questionnaire and the semi-structured interview questions. And during this phase, it's important to consider what should be assessed. So examples of things that could be assessed are the current challenges, the skills that exist and the skills gaps, the technology that exists and the technology that's required in an adapted form, and what the long-term technology needs are and why. And then you would look at what question format is most useful. So for example, you could have multiple choice questions. You could have open-ended questions, you could have a checklist, or you could have a mix of these different question types. And what's most critical is that you identify what types of questions are necessary to capture the needs assessment and the baseline study, and what type of questions the community can actually answer. So this should be a positive experience for everyone that provides tangible data points. And then finally, before you would go out doing wide-scale data collection, the questions that you select should be tested. Then when we move on to the third phase, this considers the most appropriate method to collect the needs assessment baseline study for this community, and you would implement the data collection. So the methods that could be considered include interviews, focus groups, key informant interviews, or surveys. And for most projects, several methods would be used to collect data at different points and from different groupings of people. So having prepared and tested the questions and selected the data collection method, the site volunteers would then schedule and commence the data collection related to the baseline study and the needs assessment. And it's important to consider how the data collected will be collected and stored for subsequent analysis. So methods that are used for data collection include recording the interviews with the respondents' permission, complemented by field notes, or you could capture survey data in Excel, or you could have a mix of both. Then the final stage is focused on data analysis. So in the data analysis stage, we take the outputs that we've received and recorded and documented, and we compare the responses received. So we look for themes, we look for common elements, and we look for differences. And then we synthesize the data to prepare a clear statement of the community needs and the current baseline. So we identify the needs, we document the current state of play, and that's critical because if we don't capture the baseline now, we have no way to scientifically assess the impact. The impact shouldn't be, we think we did good. It should be, this was what the state of play was in the community before the intervention. This is the state of play in the middle of the intervention, and this is the final and then longer term impact. From the data we've collected, we identify, can this need that we've identified be addressed with technological innovation, and how? How does the proposed technological innovation cost effectively address these needs in this specific social and cultural context in an appropriate and sustainable manner? And that is different from country to country, specifically in a region as big as Region 8, but also from areas within a country, so rural, urban, semi-urban. So you need to really look at the context within which you're deploying the project. How is the technological focus well aligned with the Pacific thematic areas of this call? So we highlighted the Pacific 4 SDGs that this call is focused on, and with IEEE technical areas. What capacities are required to implement the project? What capacities already exist in the beneficiary community? And what tangible capacity building activities are required to achieve local sustainability? When we engage with communities, there needs to be clear research ethics, and I'll summarize these. So we need to follow research ethics when we're collecting data from people that inform a project and solution, when we're co-designing products, services, business models with end user communities or different stakeholder groups, and where there's a possibility of new intellectual property being created. This is done through informed consent. So participants must be clear about how the data inputs will be used, so they, as the community members, can decide if they wish to participate. They need to have a clear statement of the focus of engagement, why this community was selected and why these specific grouping of people are being interviewed, their role and any risks, how the input will be used, and how they can access results. They need to have the ability to opt out of the study, and there needs to be a level of anonymity. So when you are writing your reporting and when you are ultimately publishing papers at the end of the intervention, the data you've collected initially is allocated to individuals. So for example, if you interviewed me, your initial notes would say, Miriam said this, that, and the other. But when you present the results as a report or when you publish the results, Miriam becomes respondent 1. So when you publish outputs of a study, it should never be possible for the reader to go back to an identifiable person. You need to have the evidence that this person said it, but when you report it in an anonymous fashion. The informed consent should be recorded. It's either a signed form or it's recorded in some other mechanism. And ultimately, the purpose of informed consent and research ethics is to protect the participants. They should be protected from any negative consequences or risks. We shouldn't target vulnerable groups that can't provide informed consent, and that includes children, prisoners, handicapped people, people with serious illnesses. And I would highlight that children cannot provide informed consent. So if you're doing something under SDG 4 that includes some form of capacity building learning activities with grouping of children, they cannot provide informed consent to participate in your activity. You must have approval from a legal guardian, and that should be documented in some form. And then, depending on the country and the specific domain that you're doing the study in, you may require institutional review board ethical approval, which is done through a higher education institution. And in some countries, particularly African countries, you may need ethical approval from the National Research Board before you can undertake a community-driven project. And this type of formal approval takes time and needs to be planned into the intervention preparatory stage. So we propose that ethical research principles are applied to all ICT for D interventions to ensure that the local communities are protected and that there's an appropriate balance in decision making between the implementing team and the beneficiary community.